So now we're live. So we are in Palms, and this is actually on UCLA property. So these are the dorms, right? And it's only graduate students that live here. Is that true?
Yeah, it's only graduate students and dependents like me.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. It's your wife that's the graduate student here.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
When people here meet me for the first time, and then they ask me like, "Oh, which department are you in?" And then I always say I'm in the husbandry department.
You know, you could pull off mathematics, and people would say,
Yeah.
"Oh, yeah, sure."
Yeah, sometimes I do have some of those mathematical T-shirts.
Mm-hmm.
My wife, she often went to Greece for some research.
Yeah.
Which she does, and then she goes to these shops.
Oh.
Yeah. What?
Always.
Are you gonna cut it out?
What? No, continue. I'm just terrible at this. It's the one step I always forget.
I saw that at Joel's.
Yeah, it's the one step I always forget.
It's not bad.
Eventually, I won't. It's almost.
No, I just wanted to say that, and she buys those old Greek T-shirts, you know, like Platonic images, like, you know, old Greek math stuff, and then people think here that I in the math department.
No, it makes perfect sense.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
you know, like the foreigner with the accent.
Yeah,
and,
exactly.
That looks kind of strange, and like, you know.
And I also move freely around here, but I am active here in the resident association.
Right.
So people do get to see me here more often, but yeah, I'm not a student here. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And it's good that I'm not.
Why is that?
All those books you have to read. And
Yeah, you're like that looks like hard work.
Yeah, it is.
Oh, yeah, I mean, I've seen your wife. She works really hard. Yeah, so
Yeah, it is basically all the time.
It's a tough job. Yeah.
I mean, she kind of, you know, how she explains always, you kind of like, if you're really into it, you have to work on it all the time. There's no really free time, because even if you're not working, you're still thinking about that stuff, you know, how you're going to do some, because that's the thing when you're doing intellectual stuff.
Right.
It is like, you're like, kind of like always working. You actually need to figure out how to free yourselves from that. Yeah. So,
I mean,
yeah, so
there's all those other parts. She has to be a teacher too, and grade papers, and students, and then she has to do her own work on top of that.
Yeah,
oh gosh.
It's
tough.
Yeah, I rather do what I do right now, and that's I sing songs with little kids in the kindergarten where I'm the instructional assistant. That's tough too, but to another degree.
Yeah, but when you go home, you go home.
Yeah, I go home. Yeah.
Yeah. That's
okay, right now I work from home. So.
Right, but you know, it's. I can imagine.
This is a post-COVID interview.
So,
Yeah.
right, but your Franca, your wife, does she? The classes that she's involved with, are any of them sort of general ed classes that? Or is it only stuff that people are interested in? No.
I mean, when she used to TA, it was these general classes everybody had to take. So
those are tough because
Yeah.
you know, those people, they're just trying to fulfill a requirement necessarily, and then they picked it because they thought that it would be easy.
But actually, there are a lot of people. So she's in the art history department, and there are actually a lot of people that study for a major like chemistry or I don't know, physics, and they tend to be actually more interested in this art history stuff than some humanities guys. So because for them it's so different from what they're interested in the you know, as a job, but then they see and they tend to be also very good students of hers actually. You know, so yeah, there's stuff like that. Yeah, you was surprised.
Well, yeah, I think the other part about that is that I don't know if you've really picked up this American trope yet, but there's a big joke about art history as being like not a real major, and you don't really do anything. Yeah. But of course, it's all false, and it's a very intense academic, rigorous study. Yeah. So maybe what happens is people go in there and think, oh, this is just like one of those nonsense courses, and they find out that actually it's you know, it's not. It's very real.
Yeah. I mean, even within the humanities, you know, they tend to look down at art history, being just looking at paintings and, you know, working in museums for those rich guys and whatever. But the way my wife does it, and her advisor as well, they actually treat it as history. It's not art, it's history where they use different kinds of sources that the other historians use because they're so textually focused, like text sources. But art historians just look at history too, but they use different kind of sources to interpret that those realities.
I mean, the thing about art is that it's kind of a reflection. Good art is a reflection of the culture or the struggles of the time, if you will, right? So when you're talking about art from, let's say, 1600s, it's also that same thing. And so it gives you a unique insight. But in order to understand that insight, you have to understand the underlying culture, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah. So basically they're using those artifacts from those times to reconstruct the realities, because today we're maybe a little bit too much into textual sources because we trust them too much, because people lie all the time. Why are historians exempt from that insight that people do lie? Why wouldn't they lie? Because actually history, I think what I've seen so far, is always written in political important situations. So you write a big American history and in time when you're fighting the British, maybe. That would be a good point. Like, let's see how glorious we have been so far here. That will, motivate people to fight in wars.
It's also a different kind of knowing, a different kind of knowledge. It's that, I wouldn't document the stuff that artists would be document. You know what I mean? Like, so let's just pick somebody, for instance. Let's pick somebody like, I don't know, Andy Warhol.
Andy
right?
Warhol. Oh.
Who did a lot of things about responses to the commercialization of culture, right? And how, like his Maryland one, things like that, right? And just how sort of commodified things were becoming, whatever it is, right? And if you looked at maybe the historians, I guess now we document that part of society. But that's kind of what the purpose of art has always been. But, people wouldn't necessarily be talking about those cultural illusions. Charles Dickens, for instance, a lot of his stories, he refers to sort of contemporary stories of the time. Like, I don't know, maybe a controversial book or whatever. But it's completely lost in us. We'd read over it and we'd be like, oh, it's just part of the story, because we don't know, that was like a big news item of 1835 or whatever. So, and of course, that's fiction, but it has a sort of different documentation of the reality of the time that, some kind of true historian would kind of look over. Yeah. Because they're worried about politics and things like that, and not really worried about the Lindbergh baby or whatever it is.
Yeah, it's all about those viewpoints. Whose viewpoint are you going to use to interpret stuff that happened in the past? That's what I've learned from Howard Zinn's book is the People's History of the United States.
Of course, that's a good one.
When he explained, I'm going to write this book from the perspective of the guys who were losing all these
right, there's all this
struggles.
Unique information in there,
Yeah, so...
Or whenever you read anything about the labor history.
All
that stuff. You read about in Jacobin, I'm sure.
Yeah. So there's not just all those, objective struggles as well, like, for example, the further you go in history, the more languages you basically have to know, because, you want to use, like my wife, she's researching the medieval times, so you have to know Latin,
Right, and you have
Latin.
to know
There's different kinds of Latins, as well, like Old Greek, because she's primarily a Byzantinist.
It's not the contemporary version of the language. It's because even if they use the same words, they have different meanings. We talk about that in Shakespeare, how like Shakespeare has a bunch of hidden jokes in there because there's sort of antiquated definitions, like nurse also meant prostitute back then, or something like that. Wow. So they'd be like, oh, she's your nurse, and then and everybody was supposed to laugh in the 1600s. But now we just sort of gloss over it because definitions sort of faded away. So
Yeah.
even if it's the same words, it's
within the same language.
Yeah.
I mean, languages change through time.
Yes.
Through time, so much to various degrees. So yeah, it's really hard. It's an extremely hard job to do research, like historical research. On top of all these other, and then the stuff you have to read about that stuff, like that's written. Let's say the Germans were, researching a lot of things. They were not really, in the history. I don't know. They were not, like British people, like all over the place. So what I read in some books was, the German guys but they still did research because they were reading stuff the British guys were telling about. So and then they would do their research, like scholarly research. So there's a bunch of research on India in Germany, but they were not the imperial rulers, but still they did. So then you need to know German if you want to, do research and stuff.
Oh yeah, I was reading
a lot of French. So you need to know a lot of languages. Basically.
I was reading a book when I was working on my other podcast. I was reading I guess late 1700s, and they started quoting blocks of German in Fraktur, right? Like it was like a different script and everything. Oh, yeah. And they didn't provide a translation afterwards. Oh, yeah. And it was as if like if I was a scholarly person, of course I'd know German. In the 1700s.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
Obviously, and then they have like French and Latin. It's like, of course you know these languages.
Yeah.
Like, no, I don't.
Yeah, it's so hard. But then again, in this country, learning languages is not really. How should I say, encouraged.
No, it's not. And not only that, even if I was able to take this Fraktur block and put into Google Translate, I'm not going to get the 1700s translation of it.
No, it's not. But paradoxically, the U.S. has maybe the most diverse or among most diverse people living here.
Oh yeah.
But isn't that strange? So on one side, everything gears towards English, like you have to assimilate as soon as possible. People coming here from places within one generation.
I wrote an article a couple years ago
really?
About how, and it was that I think one of the stats that I cited was in Los Angeles and New York. It was something like, I forget what it was, but I think it was around 50% of people speak a language other than English at home.
Oh, there you go.
And that, within like the metropolitan area, there were like over 200 languages that were spoken at home. It was some extreme number.
Yeah.
And then it might have been the 40s or something, but it was high. It might have been 60s. I don't know what it was. But then you think to yourself, oh yeah, I do know a lot of people that speak a language other than English at home.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just Spanish. It was like, a whole slew of hundreds of languages you've never even heard of.
Yeah. So for me, that's kind of like a big potential, for people learning from each other these various languages, in that kind of sense. But on the other hand, there's this...
Well, you have to establish that you're also a professional language instructor. So,
I do.
So you're just looking for business.
People learn more languages.
Especially German.
It's so cool. Yeah, but I mean, it's not so. And I think there's a potential loss of people meeting each other, exchanging ideas, learning languages from each other, from culture. Because when people do meet here, they meet on the ideology of the Americanism or English language. So even maybe more here in LA than in New York, because I was reading that book about LA history called City of Quartz by Mike Davis. This city was built so people do not meet at all. Like
correct.
It was
absolutely.
It was the purpose.
It was built as a segregated city.
Yeah, like totally
absolutely.
From day one. So people would never. So here, so many people live here, but so few meet actually. And for me, that's
why we have Chinatown, Thai Town, Little Cambodia. We have all of these areas that are named after cultures.
Yeah.
Because at one point, that was the only place you could live if you were that. Exactly. You couldn't leave there. And I'm talking like within living memory, like maybe 60s or 70s.
Yeah, and what I've also read in that book, that those places, they used to change them. Like, Chinatown guys, we want to build this Union Station now go somewhere else. Like, oh my God.
Oh, yeah. They cut up Chinatown multiple times.
Yeah,
they put freeways there, right? That's where all the freeways went, right? Then they put Union Station there. Yeah, of course. They're the first to be destroyed, right?
Yeah. Or that, Joe is always telling us about that.
The Japanese town in Long Beach.
Long Beach, the island. I mean, or even in Sotel, that Japantown, also called.
Little Osaka.
Yeah, they also suffered a lot during the World War II, where they were also moved to those concentration camps. I mean, various, African Americans were also, I also heard pushed from some areas where they lived a lot because, they wanted to develop it in a different way. So yeah, this city is pretty. So this is what I realized.
But the part that we live in Palms is not bad. It's interesting because there's actually a lot of Muslims that live here.
Oh really?
You didn't know that?
I mean,
in Palms?
I've seen few people, but that's the thing about never meeting people here.
Yeah, isn't that interesting?
I know actually. Yeah, there's a mosque.
Yeah,
I know. It's the culture center of Palms.
There's the Islamic Culture Center.
Yeah.
And then there's a mosque down the street now.
Yeah.
Where they go around it's only men, right?
You see
around noon or 1 on Friday. And you can go down there, and it looks like the Jews on Saturday. And everybody's, but they don't dress in special clothes, so you can't tell. Yeah. So they just leave their house and they all walk down there.
Yeah.
And a lot of these Muslim men, even in work, they don't dress differently, and they don't look dramatically different. They don't have their hair different. They look just like whatever, foreigners, right?
Yeah.
So and not only that, but we have a lot of Pakistani and Indian food around here, right? And we have some halal restaurants. Like once you start looking around, there's a lot of there's a lot of Muslim populations here. I've also seen women that have been fully clothed.
Oh yeah.
What's
it called? Something like.
Well, there's a lot of different ones, like hijab, niqab. There's a bunch of ones, and I'm going to get it wrong, so I'm not going to say it. But where you can't see them.
Yeah.
And I've got a bad joke, but this is true. The first time I saw that, I was a little kid, and I was in a grocery store, and I told my mom, I said, "Mom, look, it's a real ninja."
Oh no.
And she said something like, "Shh. You're not supposed to know. Be quiet. Don't tell anybody."
Oh no.
And that was the perfect response.
Yeah. That's the kind of. Yeah, I mean, yeah.
I was like 4 years old, and I had no idea.
Yeah,
all I had was exposure to cartoons, right?
Yeah.
So I see somebody all in black, and it's
I mean, it is funny. I mean, for me, those type of situations, we're robbed from them in this city because we don't meet as many. Like I just said, I don't really see them around. I know there's mosques and a center.
Yeah, but we don't know our neighbors.
But I don't know. We don't. Yeah, even people from my building. So I used to live here for a year. So in the first 2 years, I did not know my neighbors on my floor. I would not meet them ever. And then I got involved in the resident association, and that's how I started to get to know people. But
a lot of that is due to architectural choices that we make, which is an interesting thing. But if you go to, I don't know, any European city, Zagreb, I haven't been there, but I'm going to assume that this is true, is that if you had an apartment building like this, there would be many outward doors that would go out to the street where people could leave and then be on the sidewalk, right?
Yeah.
Whereas in Los Angeles, it's almost like a fortress. And you can only leave by a car, which is underneath. And there's a huge gate in front of it. And there's really no way for somebody to walk to the street unless it was a fire exit. Unless you absolutely have to.
Exactly.
But beyond that, then you have the sidewalks, and the sidewalks are super narrow, almost like they just have to be there legally speaking, right? Yeah. And nobody really pays attention to them.
And people just now noticed because
of COVID.
Because of COVID, now people have to walk on the street to keep that 6 feet apart. Hi, Franca. We're talking about you.
She's off camera, but
yeah, and now it's just now that I noticed once the people started walking, actually, that this infrastructure we have just looks nice on a photo, but it's not functional at all for a
it doesn't afford community building, which is the important thing.
And how did you combat? I mean, you live in LA now for many years, and did you actively fight that architecture in a way, consciously, or did you have a strategy how to meet people? Because I know you know a lot of people, you met them. How did you do it? I mean. living in this city that's so unfriendly, meeting people, but I know you met a lot.
Yeah, it's interesting because like the only sort of people you happen to meet in Los Angeles, like on the street, want something from you. Right? Like that's why people are so sort of off-putting, because it's usually somebody bumming for change, or maybe somebody trying to con you or something like, you know what I mean? Like it almost never happens where somebody's just trying to chit-chat with you, unless they're, and you're like, oh, you must be from out of town.
From out of town. From like a small town in America where they do that.
where people talk to each other still. How do I meet people? Well,
I mean, I know you go to galleries or
I think
or art shows or
I think that I am approachable, warm, and personable, and although maybe I don't immediately come off like that, I think that people find me to be a little bit easy to deal with, maybe, right?
Okay. All right.
Like I'm not difficult.
Yeah.
And really, I think that that's when it gets down to it. When you're trying to rate friends, the one metric that will always exist is how much effort are they?
Effort. Yeah.
You know, like do I have to put in a lot of effort to do this?
Yeah, Chris, it's time, I think.
and I think that I am like one of the lowest effort kind of friends out there. So I think that that's how I can maintain these.
Yeah. But I meant more like, how do you meet? And I know you know a lot of people, like random people.
Yeah.
That's what I mean. Not just friendships, but like, how do you? I know that you talk to a lot of people you don't really know. And that part is so hard in this city, like to get to know people, not just become friends. Okay, that's not a thing. But how did you do it? Like, how do you? What was your? Did you had like a strategy for that, or
no, not really. I mean,
just like saying, okay, I'm going to go to an art show, and if I want to say to that person, I'm just going to say.
Well, kind of, because one of the opportunities of Los Angeles that a lot of us don't take advantage of is we're in the entertainment capital of the world, right? And there's two sides of that. There's one side where like you're trying to make it in the industry, and neither of us are going to do that. Yeah. But there's the other side where you get all this free stuff and access to things, and like I have met so many celebrities just through like the WGA or the Screen Actors Guild or the DGA, the Writers Guild.
Oh, Writers Guild.
And I could just do a laundry list of celebs that I've been, maybe about this distance from, right?
Oh, wow. And how are they?
They're just normal people.
Really?
For the most part. And they'll do like little small screenings at like maybe Hammer Museum or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
And so to sort of like keep up to date on the sort of local community organizations like that and their event, after COVID or pre-COVID, whatever, and keep updated in their event calendar, then you'll find out, oh, look, I don't know, Steven Spielberg is showing up at, blah, blah, blah on a Tuesday night. And then you go there and you might get in or you might not or whatever. But what I'm saying is that like they're very low key and they don't really advertise, but it happens all the time. So that's one thing that happens. And then there's a lot of different kinds of organizations that are associated with Hollywood. So there's things like a lot of film festivals. So like documentary film festivals or ones that are different genres like horror or sci-fi or whatever it is. And then different ethnicities too. And also like all of the alt ones, like the gay ones and things like that. So those have their, so what I'm saying is there's all these sort of like knitted communities that you can sort of go over and say, oh, well, let's go to theater. Let's do this, let's do that. Sort of be up to date on what's going on. And if you happen to meet somebody, then that's great. And if you don't, then you just had a good evening. And it's all pretty affordable, right? We're like it's either free or maybe $10. Like we're not talking huge amounts of money.
Parking, Chris. Don't forget the parking.
Of course, you have to come 2 hours early, and then you have to take a bus over there from your parking space.
Or pay $20 for parking. So it's not just,
of course.
But I was wondering about, Hammer Museum. I was there a few times. And to me, Hammer Museum inside looks like public space in Europe. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
This is pretty much a concept that I've seen here. That there are those places that Angelinas go to experience outdoors, but it's all indoors, kind of way controlled. So for me, it's that type of what I see there, and what I was reading in that book, City of Courts, is they created public spaces where liberties and rights of citizens are not anymore in the way of security.
It's a
you know what I mean?
It's a filter for the public.
Yeah,
right?
because it is free
hold on.
admission. Yeah,
I have to cut you off. Do you have a topic to discuss?
No.
You don't?
No, let's talk about.
I didn't tell you. I didn't tell you. Oh shit.
No, why? This is nice.
Yeah. Usually I ask people to take a topic.
No, look.
And then I thought that you might have had one.
It's Los Angeles. So
okay.
Being immigrant in Los Angeles.
Being an immigrant in Los. Okay, yeah. So let's broach that a bit. So you've been here for 5 years. You came from a very small country called Croatia, which went through a terrible civil war in your lifetime. Yeah. And so there's a unique position that you have in that, as Americans, when we refer to the war, we refer to something that our grandparents did. When you refer to the war, you refer to something in your childhood.
Yeah, it's true.
Which is a terrible, but also a fairly unique position that you and maybe only a few other countries have the awful sort of curse or privilege of having.
But it's not just a few. There's a bunch of countries where there's war.
Well, I understand.
Yeah.
But what I mean is that, like, if you're, let's say, Chinese or Japanese or something, and you refer to the war, you're not talking about,
that's true.
French or English. Like, it's true. Like, I understand. Yes, if you're like Somali or Sudanese or something, okay, fine. But
or now in the Caucasus region, they're now starting a war there.
Of course. But if you're talking about the global population, we're probably only talking about single-digit percentages, maybe 9 or 8. Well, whatever it is, it's not significant.
Not if you do not count the class war.
Let's move on. Okay, so you, as a child, escaped to Germany to avoid the risks that are associated with war. Yeah, and you lived there for a while.
Yeah, it's true. So I also had I lived for 5 years in Germany. That's why I speak German.
Now, here's a question I haven't asked you. Is that
what's up?
So I know that when war breaks out, the first thing that non-participants want to do is get out. Was that during World War II? Nobody wanted the Jews, and that was the biggest problem of why. People say, "Oh, the Germans killed the Jews," and that's true, but they were also stuck with them. Their first strategy was, let's get rid of them and try to give them to other countries, but every country said no, and so they're stuck with them, and they're racist, and so then they came up with let's just kill them, right? Yeah. And so they're still wicked and evil. I'm not saying they aren't, but their first strategy didn't work. So I don't know. So when you guys were trying to leave, were other countries willing to take you in, or was it difficult?
No, Germany took a lot of people from Yugoslavia during that war, and it's only because of that then the Yugoslav immigrants was the second biggest population after the Turks in Germany.
So were there certain areas that were Yugoslav that you went to?
I mean, people went there where they had family, because there was actually a history of Yugoslav people going to Germany for work. Is that guest worker program that the German government introduced in the 60s, I think.
So what part of Germany were you in?
So I lived in Berlin.
Oh, wonderful! What part of Berlin?
It was in Eastern Berlin.
And so this was after the fall of the wall?
Yeah, after.
Okay.
So it was already unified. But I lived in the eastern part, so and a little bit in the western, but most of the time in the eastern. So I could also see the contrast. I mean, it was like 93.
So this was shortly after.
Shortly after, but you could see. I mean, big difference between those two cities because of the history.
It's really amazing because there's two things there that are really interesting. There's a documentary that was made around 92, 93. Basically what happened is, this was one of the first sort of real big gentrification documentaries, is that when you lived right at the wall, that was an impoverished place to live. Nobody wanted to live there, right?
True, yeah.
But then when they tore down the wall, that became the center of the city. Yeah. So then all of those residents got kicked out. Yeah. And there's a documentary about that. It's very interesting. And the other thing that I found fascinating is that I did this multiple times, is that I took the roads and the trains that basically went over where the wall used to be, and thinking, can I tell? Could I tell? Because what would happen is that the West Berlin train or the West would stop. And then there'd be like an actual wall, right? And then the East Berlin train would pick up again, right?
Yeah.
But it's seamless. Cannot tell anymore.
Yeah.
And had to like look on a reference again. And that was it.
Yeah.
And so they've made it invisible, except for the monument.
Monument, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it's pretty much. I mean, today I haven't been there for a few years right now, but yeah, but the biggest difference you can tell between the eastern part and the western still today is in the eastern part is still like a tram system.
Correct.
And the western doesn't have, because they did not develop that, like a street. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, the streetcars.
The streetcars, yeah. That's how you can tell the difference.
Well, not only that, but the architecture is still quite different between the two of them.
Yeah, even though Berlin for a long time was the biggest construction site in Europe. Like they were building like a lot. I've seen construction site as big as probably as palms. They were building stuff. After the unification. So that's how. Maybe you've been there. The Potsdamer Platz. Have you been there?
I've been there.
It's the Sony Center there. Where they have that giant glass ceiling and all those new buildings there. It's called Potsdamer Platz, maybe.
I might have been there without realizing I was there.
It's one that was the biggest construction site.
Yeah, I mean, I spent an aggregate of maybe a few weeks there, so I think, yeah.
Yeah, so they built a lot and they gentrified a lot of the city. That's what's happening in Berlin as well.
Yeah,
all those artists.
It's not as bad as LA though.
Yeah, no, not to that extent.
It's
extreme because here the whole city is built on that, but it's harder to do these things in Europe because the cities are older, the infrastructure is already there, so people have a better chance fighting off developer guys.
I have a friend who used to live here. It's a friend of a friend, and he was a restaurateur, which is he owns restaurants, right? Yeah. And he described. So when I went over there with my friend, he met up with him, and I had a long conversation with him, and he had a number of failed restaurants in Los Angeles, and his average rent around here was about $15,000 a month.
Wait, what did you say? What?
His average rent to have a restaurant in a nice part of town was about $15,000 a month.
Ouch. Yeah.
And he said, well, I can have an equivalent one in Germany here for $750.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
1/15 the cost.
Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah.
And so he's like, oh, this is just it just doesn't matter. I can do whatever I want. This is great.
Yeah.
And we always talk about how much people struggle for rent of apartments, but people struggle for rent of local businesses as well.
Yeah.
This is so expensive, and there's no rent control on those, right?
Yeah.
The people who own the shopping center could raise their rent tomorrow, an exorbitant amount, and kick you out. And so, and that's why we only see all the chain restaurants around. Right?
Yeah, the problem is that this whole industry of rentiers is so big. It's one of the biggest industries in California. So, that stifles actually economy. You can't really, restaurants go bankrupt all the time. Even pre-COVID, it was like crazy. So that's kind of the environment we've built in this city, and I wished we would start building, like, understanding our, the spaces where we live as ecosystems, economic ecosystems, like
it's the same root.
Yeah,
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, we understanding like we're all contributing to something, but what is that we contributed? So, but the way things are laid out now, we contribute, so it gets worse because we have the system of taking advantage of each other. This is
it's a struggle against individualism, right? And
Yeah.
it's nice to hear that everybody acknowledges that that's the problem these days.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah,
and even the people on our adversaries on the political right, they seem to identify the same problems, although they see alternative solutions, right?
Yeah, but people are waking up, but the thing is that the political elites, the economic elites, they hang on their wealth. They don't want to lose it, so they're doing everything to keep it as it was, just change it, tweak it a little bit, so we get over with this current crisis. And that's why that's why now it all exploded. 2020 is the craziest year for our generation.
Fewer and fewer people are going along with that, I think.
Yeah.
I don't think it's increasing. I think it's decreasing. Right?
What do you mean it's decreasing?
Look at the Trump, for instance, right? The reason that Trump won is because the Republicans weren't going along with the program anymore, right?
Yeah.
And that's the reason that Bernie almost won the primaries, right?
Yeah.
Is that you've got more and more people that are engaged who just do not go with the mainstream, the sort of the standardized thing.
That's true.
And even to this day, when you go around, you see very few Biden signs, right?
Oh, yeah, not so many.
I mean,
true.
like,
I still see some Bernie.
Yeah. I mean, they exist. I've seen them, or Biden bumper stickers or whatever. Is that it's just that, I think that so few people are energized by that way of doing things.
Yeah. There's that, but also the other day I was talking to a police officer who's part of our community. He's UCPD, so UCLA, and
a police officer.
Yeah.
Well, we're done.
And he's part of our meetings and stuff like that. So what he told us the other day was shocking. So he said basically, what he did one night graveyard shit a few weeks ago here to catch people stealing bikes in the garages and whatever.
Okay.
And they placed like a bike with microchips so they can trace them.
Right.
And he said that one bike they put up there was stolen 2 times within 1 hour. It was so bad. And he told us like there are many transients right now here. People, we had the other day somebody trying to get in an apartment while the resident was in the apartment. Like it was like 8 p.m. Stuff like that. And he told us basically what happened due to COVID. A lot of prisons released on $1 bail a lot of people on the streets. And he told us, but no institutions taking care of those people. They're now on the streets, having nobody in their lives. And of course, what they're going to do is go back to their activities, to survive.
Well, not necessarily back to their activities, but there's no support network.
I
used to work downtown, and it was a couple blocks away from the LA jail or whatever it is. I know there's a difference between jail and prison, and I don't want to get it wrong, but whatever it was.
Yeah.
And frequently, when I was about to go home, there'd be somebody that would come up and say, "Hey, I just got out of jail or prison or whatever it was.
Yeah.
Could you spot me, whatever, $15 for a bus or whatever?"
Jesus, they don't even have a bus.
And I think to myself, like, how is this going to work?
Yeah.
When we're like, okay, I'm going to throw you in jail for 5 or 10 years.
Yeah.
Then I'm going to just say, "All right, well, here's your clothes, bye."
Yeah.
Like,
exactly. What are you going to do?
You're going to give them nothing?
I mean, at least, Shawshank Redemption, the movie from the 90s?
Yeah.
Yeah, they were portraying, prisoner life, in the 60s?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, those guys back then, it wasn't, great as well, but when those guys get out, they had programs for them.
Right.
Like a shitty job, somewhere, a place to stay, because of course, but this is all gone because we live in a neoliberal, world where prisons are privatized, nobody gives a damn. Human life, I think human life today is less worth. I think the 20th century
not only that, but
taught us that human life is not so valuable.
The other part is that we seem to be willing to spend for punitive means, but for helpful means, our wallets are empty.
Yeah.
So, when I say, well, maybe we should spend money to, help people in some way, and they'd say, oh, well, they didn't deserve it. I worked hard for this and that and whatever. And I say, okay, fine. Let's spend 10 times as much to criminalize them. Okay, sure. Let me hand over the cash.
Exactly.
And it's just like, guys, it's like there's much more effective policies here that would save you a lot of money and actually solve society's problems. But you have to get over this kind of idea of they don't deserve it or whatever it is.
But did people really choose that? Did American people really had a chance to choose? Like, did somebody say, look, do you want to invest in prisons or do you want to invest in schools? Did that ever happen? I mean, I don't know. I'm here for 5 years, but you've been longer than I was. So did that ever really happen, or did the elites like sneak in all those changes? You know what I mean? Like,
I wouldn't say the elites did. I would say that it's part of the sort of the long-term conservative project that started in the 50s or so, with all the think tanks and the Milton Friedmans and the Chicago School and all those other things, right? It came out of the anti-New Dealers, right? And it's just sort of taken over American culture. And so,
but that's what I think. That's what I mean. Like, I don't think American people
now it's just sort of taken as, you know.
Yeah, but nobody really made the choice. It's something that happened over time. You know, cooked like a frog in warm water, but keep heating it up a little bit so the frog doesn't jump out if it's too. I think that's what happened. People, did not notice all these changes, but when you talk with them about those things, they stick with it now because it's their club they're defending, like their team. I think that's what happened. They never made a conscious choice. Okay, I'm going to vote for that politician who wants to, put people in prison and public schools. I don't think that really happened, or did it? Did some people say, "Yeah, prisons, no schools"? Like,
that's not how.
Do you know anybody like that?
The point of the point of a think tank is to start with an agenda and then spin it in a way to sell it to the American people.
Exactly.
That's their entire objective.
Yeah, and that's what I also think what happened, that this system got old now. I think we're living in an old system that's so sophisticated now that people who run it don't have to be smart, and it's still going to work. I think that we're at that point, like, because the elites that we look up now, they're not smart.
No.
You know what I mean? Like, the current president, I don't think anybody thinks like he's very intelligent. You know what I mean? But still, it's
across the board.
Nobody
really looks at any politician and says,
impressed,
oh, that's an accomplished
individual. Anything. So I think we live now at a stage it's very old, the system. It's so good greased. It's basically going on its own, but it pushed us over the edge now. So it destroyed the society like totally. And everybody wonders what's going to happen next. I've heard a lot of people now buying guns, even though Joe told me like that's something usually happens in America where always there's a thing, people buy guns, like. But I don't know. I've heard a lot of people buying guns for the first time now, like being like anti-gun and all, but saying this thing is so crazy. There might be a civil war. I'm going to buy a gun type of thing. What do you think about it? Did you consider buying a gun?
No, I would like to leave prior to that.
Where? Croatia?
Oh, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah,
I mean, I don't have much love for the concept of America.
Yeah.
Because the concept of America, what's it, McDonald's? I mean,
McDonald's.
I don't care. Like,
McDonald's
Britney Spears.
I would say actually McDonald's is like maybe the biggest institution America has, like for the people, because that's what I've heard for some people. Like people say, I go to McDonald's because I can't sit anywhere else, like and have a cup of coffee, like a human being, because nobody bothers you at McDonald's if you sit there and do nothing. So it's kind of like a park.
Yeah. So it's our notion of public space, Yeah.
Like even if you're at home, I've heard those McDonald's people even tolerate homeless people, like warming themselves a little bit. So it's kind of like,
But I have a hard time looking over the vast American wasteland and saying this is worth saving.
I don't know.
Burn it all.
But that's the thing. I think we should restart now, like building now already the new world.
Of course.
Not waiting. That's why I started, especially this year, gardening a lot. Learning how to. And it took me actually 3 years of gardening to figure out what you need to do to really grow constantly food. And I think this is something we have to relearn that we lost by living in cities.
Well, I mean, that's what this entire project of the podcast is about, is trying to sort of like, reinvent how people communicate, and
That's good. Yeah.
and trying to document it so people can see and say, oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. No, it is. Yeah. We need to.
I don't just have to stare at a phone screen all the time.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah. People need to. I mean, one of my students, German students, she found like a podcast from Germany because she's learning German, and she found, and then the guys there, they call random people and then have a talk with them.
Interesting.
And they record it all, and then
interesting.
and then other people listen to those kind of, they don't know who they're gonna call. They just take some number, call, and then they start asking those questions. How are you? Like, what do you do in life? What do you think about this problem we have?
I don't think that would work in America.
Oh, why not?
Huh?
Why not?
You can just hang up right away.
Oh, hang up.
Yeah.
Not too many phone telemarketers calling.
I don't know. I mean, again, maybe it's just a Los Angeles problem, but I mean, like, people don't like being approached here.
Oh.
Like it scares them, right?
But then again, you're so successful at it. You met so many people in the city.
It's gotta be in the right context, right? Like people can approach you at like a bar or something.
Yeah.
But like
in a bar.
In the general public, no.
Yeah.
Like if I went to the bus stop and started talking with somebody, like they'd like.
Oh, no, it is true in a bar. So one of my first experiences at an American bar was it was maybe the first month Frank and I were here, and we were I think in Long Beach somewhere, taking a walk, and there was this bar where we wanted to see what they have, and there was these two guys, and one of them was the owner, and they started to talk to us. Hey, why don't you go in and take a bite? And we're like, yeah, maybe we're just thinking what we're gonna do, and then the guy starts flirting with my wife in front of me, and he says something like, "Oh, wait a minute, didn't I see you the other night in my bar?" Like, he wanted to, trick me or whatever, and make it hard for me, like, my wife, and he's talking, and then I just said like, "That's impossible because we were never in a bar in America," and then the guy started laughing. Because, having those kind of conversations, it's true, it happened in a bar and not really somewhere random on the street. I mean, maybe that's the thing. So.
Yeah, I mean, there's possibilities only exist in a context.
Yeah.
Yeah.
True.
The sort of, and so it's a lot of culture is about building the right types of contexts for certain types of interactions to happen.
Yeah, but then again, what can you do? What can you do in the city of LA? So immigrants like I am, and locals, but actually everybody, is here for some other. That's also, that's what I wanted to tell you about. Is that I've heard now Texan people are afraid of California people moving out to Texas to bring their blue culture over there. So in a way now, a twist of irony happened here. Because in the 20s and the 30s, it was the Okies, people from Oakland, from that part of America, coming to California, and then the Californians, look down on them, like.
If I ever move to Texas, I'm going to become a transgender lesbian. So.
Because it is happening. The city is actually emptying. Getting emptied. Did you notice that?
Hopefully it's going to be good. Maybe we can lower the. Yeah. But it's getting emptied. But like all the losers are leaving. Like no, it's real, right? Like it's all the people that like had to be here for a job but don't want to be here.
Yeah, it's true.
Where like those people just like live in the suburbs or something. Like you're making the city suck.
Yeah.
Like because like you're the problem, and if. It's like San Francisco, right? Like if all the tech bros left and all you had were like the artists and the poets left.
Oh, yeah.
Well, great. Yeah. Fantastic. That's exactly what you want there.
Yeah.
So it's the startup culture ruined the city, and
that's the thing. Our development, the way we all, the direction we go, is making things worse. I mean, it's just making things worse. We're not really making this place a better place to
Well,
live.
I mean, we could, and so like these new giant apartment buildings that are being constructed here, like they could be architected in such a way to encourage community building.
Yeah,
But they aren't. They're
that's not gonna happen, no.
built like fortresses again. You know.
Because you need security. That's the catch-22. Like living in LA, because they build. The reason is security. Because there's so many, criminal activity going on in the city because people are so poor they can't find jobs, that they build that kind of infrastructure, but probably that infrastructure in the first place created.
Right, you can't address any of these problems independently.
You know what I mean?
You have to address all of them at once somehow, collectively.
In a way, because nobody's going to invest now in building a giant building that's going to be open to the community, because they're going to say, yeah, but homeless people are going to get into it easily. You can't throw them out.
We should fix homelessness.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing, is that we shouldn't use the excuse of homelessness to preclude community building.
Yeah.
Because that's a separate problem, and we should address that problem independently.
Yeah. But that's the thing. I was at a community meeting, Palms neighborhood meeting. One time I went. Because that Wednesday, my resident association had no meeting for some reason, I forgot, but I went. And we had the city controller there telling us basically that the city of LA did everything, or the government did everything it can with all those measures that were passed a few years ago, like building apartments, for example. But basically they did not succeed after years and years, because for the city it's too expensive to build apartments in LA. Because and he said it wasn't really that the land was sold at a much higher price, which is that might happen, or that the company that's a registered vendor, I guess, that overcharged the city. It didn't even happen too. He just said it's the bureaucracy. The bureaucracy, that it has to go through the whole city bureaucracy, and that ended up being the most expensive part of building, apartments, low cost or low, what's it called? Low, apartments for poor people. And so for all the money they got from that measure that was passed, they built only a few hundred apartments. But how many are there now living here? What's the number now?
Almost 66,000.
Okay.
And
he said, look,
I'm curious about that one, because
and the last thing he said, we're hoping now the private sector is going to pick up the project because they can do it for a less, much less expensive.
Because he's taking this perspective that there are these bureaucrats in charge, and it's not, and almost as if real estate developers don't control the city laws.
Yeah.
Which is, excuse me, but bullshit.
Yeah.
The real estate developers are the most important and powerful lobbying group in Los Angeles, and they basically have everybody on puppet strings.
Yeah.
And so the idea that no, they're the weak underlings and we need to empower them, it's just total bullshit.
Yeah.
And so I just either by bureaucracy, what he means is that they've created a cartel of some special club where you can't join.
Yeah.
Or B, he's just lying.
Yeah.
It's one of the two. Yeah. Because I am not going to believe that we need to give the poor, unfortunate real estate developers a little bit more power in society. No, they control everything.
Yeah.
It's like feeling bad for the king. Screw that.
You know what I think what he meant with bureaucracy, but maybe he didn't even know he was thinking about it, is that there's just too many structures that suck out money out of projects for the sake of sucking out the money. Like institutions or companies that specialized in, there's a big program going on. Okay, I have to do these and things just to get the money, but without really doing something for the program. I think there's just too much of those kind of things we have everywhere, like private sector, public sector, both. They are specialized in sucking out money from big projects, but not contributing to the implementation of it. I think this is also what happens to a system that's old, that has figured out a way of getting the money without doing the work. I think that is maybe the biggest problem we have right now, globally speaking, with the current economic system, is nobody's inventing stuff anymore.
That's correct. Yeah.
Nobody's doing any actual work.
Yeah, all the hot startups are not actually creating anything new.
Yeah, you see, that's what I mean. Like, they're just regurgitating just to get the money. They're phrasing it in a way just to get the funds from certain institutions.
Like, what was the company QB that like announced bankruptcy just the other day? It was a video. It was like a Netflix alternative, and they had like one something $1 billion.
Oh, whoa.
And like, what was their project? Their project was a new streaming service, right? It wasn't like, I don't know, like anything beneficial for society.
Yeah,
right?
no.
There's nothing great.
Because and I think
we're about out of time. We have about 45 seconds or so.
Okay, thank you so much, Chris. It was so much fun. I enjoyed this. Maybe we can have a part 2.
Yeah, but we can talk after this. Let me just end this
I have
thing.
to go. I'm kidding. Yeah. No, really, but this has to do with what they